Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Welcome back once again to our ongoing series about the glories of Sri Vrindavan Dham. I address you today from San Francisco, California, in the United States. I've come here for a kirtan retreat in Utah, Sadhu Sangha retreat. And I literally just got off the plane. So it was a long ride, 20 hours, and I have jet lag, but that's not going to deter me from giving this lecture today. Hare Krishna. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pishtaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Vishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, we are continuing with our short series on the history of Vrindavan's many temples, shrines, and havelis that were built by royal families, or in some cases individuals of those royal families, since the time of Lord Chaitanya. And as we mentioned in our first lecture, constructing these beautiful structures was a way that these wealthy patrons could express their devotion to the Lord and add to the charm of Vrindavan as we see it today. Of course, with the advancement of modern society, and in particular the influence of Kali Yuga, some of that charm has disappeared. And that was evident even in the year 1883, when the Englishman F.S. Grouse published his famous work, Mathura, a District Memoir, famous book. Therein he writes, in Old English, using some Christian terms, he writes, "Though the groves of Vrindavan in which Krishna sported with the gopis no longer resound with the echoes of his flute, though the waters of the Jamuna are daily polluted by the blood of the sacred kine, cows, still, Mathura is the sacred Jordan of his fancy, Krishna's fancy, on whose banks he may sit and weep. For the glories of Mathura, his Jerusalem." So there we get an idea. Even, in 1883, things had changed. So times have changed. But even now, if one is determined, he can find intact some pristine gems of the past, some buildings in good order, as I did the other day. Needing some inspiration in preparing this lecture, once again I went back to Vrindavan town, and I wandered through those small streets and lanes, trying to unravel the mysteries of how the old, beautiful, and ornate structures came about. So that day, my roaming brought me to the famous Lala Babu temple. Some of you may know about that. We always go there during Kartik Purkama. It's just a very beautiful structure. And it was built by a disciple of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So from there I walked to nearby Brahmakund, where many of you know Sri Rupa Goswami found his beloved Vrindadevi deity. And there I inquired from several Brajabasis who were sitting peacefully on the banks of that kund if they knew of any important or historic places nearby. So one sadhu, he pointed to a small lane nearby and he said, "Maharaj, have you ever been to Karmati Bai? Karmati Bai? It's 20 meters down the narrow lane over there." So I replied, "No, I've never been there, and who's Karmati Bai?" So the sadhu said, "Oh, she was born in a royal family, but came to Vrindavan in her youth and became a great devotee of Lord Krishna. And in memory of her," he said, "the Braj Foundation, which is a foundation which is trying to restore many of the old places in Vrindavan," he said, "the Braj Foundation established a statue of her, we would say a diorama, here at Brahmakund. And pointing with his finger, he said, "You can see her sitting right over there." And he said, "Nearby are remnants of a beautiful temple that she had constructed, or had constructed, had others construct for Lord Krishna." So I thought, there you go. My wanderings brought me to the right place. And fascinated and thinking this would be great material for this lecture, I asked where I could find out more about her. I never heard about her before. So that Brajabasi, he said, and he appeared to be a scholarly person. He said, "Maharaj, do you know the book Bhaktamal by Nabhadas?" And of course, we spoke on that book many times in our series about Vrindavan. He said to me, "Is that book authorized in your movement, Bhaktamal?" So I was a bit surprised by his, kind of probing question. So I replied in full. I said, yes, the Bhaktamal by Nabhadas was actually recommended by one of our teachers. His name was Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He said it's an authorized source of Vaishnava biographies. And I said that he actually recommended it as one of the books to be studied in his institution, Gaudiya Math, for biographies about previous acharyas. And to satisfy this Brajabasi's question, I added, there's actually another Bhaktamal written in Bengali by someone called Lal Das, but that book was rejected by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur as a Sahaja book. So satisfied, this gentleman said, then you can read about Karmati Bai in Bhaktamal. Also, you can read in more detail about her in Priyadasa's, a student of Nabhadas, his commentary on Bhaktamal. I said, "Oh, there's a commentary on Bhaktamal." He said, "Yes, he had one student." Of course, the student appeared many years after Nabhadas, but he wrote a very complete commentary on the Bhaktamal. So now I had some direction. I hurried back to my room in Ramanreti and did my research about Karmati Bai, using both Nabhadas's Bhaktamal and Priyadasa's commentary on Nabhadal's work. So I'd like to share that with you now. To begin, I found out that Karmati Bai, not to be confused actually with the queen called Karma Bai, sometimes I heard there's some confusion, but not to be confused with her. She, our Karmati Bai, she was born in Rajasthan in a lineage of kings known as the Shekavat dynasty. It's a lineage of Kshatriyas. And that lineage, I was reading, it comes from Kush, who was the younger twin son of Ramachandra. Therefore, the former name of the Shekavat lineage is Kushavati Vamsa. There's some history lesson here. The family of Kshatriyas who appeared from Kush. So hundreds of years ago, these Shekavat kings fought many battles against the Mughals, who ruled India for some time. And it's said that of these Shekavat kings, it's really nice, one who milks the lioness is Shekavat. One who kills the enemy with the first arrow is Shekavat. And one whose head is cut off while still fighting, he's a Shekavat. Hare Krishna. So several hundred years ago in Rajasthan, there was such a king named Maharao Shekavat. He ruled from a city called Shrikar. And he was known as Dharma Priya, one who was favorable towards Dharma. He was also called Nyaya Priya, which means one who likes justice and treats everyone equally. So one day, as was tradition, this particular king, he appointed a priest as the head priest. That position is called Rajguru, Rajaguru, the guru of the king. So he appointed him as the head priest in his court and his kingdom. And this priest, his name was Parashuram. And he quickly became a favorite of the king because of his knowledge and his personality. They were very close. Now, in time, Parashuram's wife gave birth to an exceptionally talented, charismatic, beautiful daughter, who at the same time was very shy and very chaste. So it's interesting, Parashuram, the Rajguru, he named her Karmati. Karmati. It means one who appeared as a result of good karma. I thought that was interesting. One who appeared as a result of good karma. Now, as a young girl, Karmati, she played and ran freely around the palace of the king. And because of her sweet nature, the king became very attached to her as well. And noticing this, people began recognizing her as a royal personality. She must be royalty. And they gave her an affectionate name. They called her Karmati Bai. The Bai is an affectionate term. Karmati Bai. And in time, Karmati Bai became very proficient in various arts and dance. But it's described her favorite activity, above and beyond anything else, was listening to the beautiful poetry from a particular court poet about the pastimes of Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan. This was her favorite activity. Now, when she became of age, her father and the affectionate king started looking together for a husband that would be qualified to marry such a girl. And in time, with great effort, they found a very nice Brahmana boy. But when informed about this, Karmati Bai, she just said, look, I'm not interested. I'm not interested to get married. So this came as a shock. So her father and the king, they asked why. She said, I've given my whole heart, body and mind to Krishna. Obviously as a result of just hearing about Krishna. Shravanam Kirtan brings Krishna Smaranam. So from that court poet always describing Radha and Krishna's pastime, her love naturally awoke. So she's not interested in marrying anybody. Actually, I was reading that every day she would worship Tulsi Devi and pray to her as follows. My dear Tulsi Devi, she would pray, please call me to your forest where day and night I can serve Radha Shama Sundar without restrictions. But despite her objections, her father went ahead and actually arranged a date for her marriage with that Brahmana boy. And as that date approached, the whole town of Srikar became, it's described, decorated like a new bride. And the king himself, out of affection for her, arranged many presents for Karmati Bai and the groom as well. And the whole town, as well as surrounding towns and villages, were all making preparations for this marriage. But as this was going on, Karmati Bai, she was very unhappy. She thought, why to get married with a person who will die one day? Let me be a servant of the Lord of Cupids, who always remains with me. So that night, the night before the wedding, she actually decided to run away to Vrindavan. And she did. As everyone in the palace slept, she managed to sneak by the guards and go into the forest and started walking in the direction of Vrindavan. Pretty brave girl. Now, the next day, when it was discovered that she had left, obviously the king, he was very upset, as was her father. So the king sent his whole army on horses to find her. She hadn't gotten that far, obviously. And when she heard the noise of the horses running, she was frantic trying to find a place to hide. But she just felt there's no place to find cover from an army of soldiers. So what to do? So suddenly she saw a large dead camel. And without any hesitation, she cut open its abdomen very wide with a knife. Remember, she's coming from a Kshatriya family. So she opened up the abdomen with this big knife. She disemboweled it, meaning she took out all the organs from the camel, and then she went inside and hid inside the dead camel for 3 days until the army had left that area searching for her. Afterwards, she took bath in a nearby pond. And when she had finished and dressed herself to continue her journey, several sadhus who had witnessed her hiding from the soldiers in that dead camel, they were like, whoa. They approached her and they said, how did you survive in the stomach of that dead camel? How could you have not fainted from the terrible smell? So Karmati Bai, she replied famously, the foul smell of the material world is worse than the smell of a dead camel. Hare Krishna. And then she continued walking to Vrindavan. A month later, it's described, she came across some brahmanas who were preparing to bathe in a sacred river. She very humbly approached them. She offered them words of praise, and then she gave all her valuable jewelry to them. Reminiscent of our first class, where one queen had also given away her jewels on the way to Vrindavan. Now, a few days later, she met an elderly sadhvi, a female sadhu, on the road, and she begged from her torn sari. She said, in exchange, I'll give you this silk dress. So that sadhvi agreed, and now Karmati Bai is wearing an old torn cloth. And she kept walking and walking and walking. And after 2 months, she finally arrived in Vrindavan Dham. Now, after spending time wandering in a number of Vrindavan's forests and visiting many holy places, she decided to take up residence at Brahmakund, where it's described she spent her days and nights just chanting the holy names of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Now all that time, her father, the Rajguru, the head priest, Parashuram, had been searching for her. And his exploration finally brought him to Mathura, to Vrindavan, where he inquired from local brahmanas if they knew the whereabouts of his daughter. Now by this time, Karmati Bai's renunciation and her devotion was well known. And the brahmanas directed Parashuram to Brahmakund. Now, when he arrived at Brahmakund, he found her, Karmati Bai, sitting on the banks of the Kund, weeping in separation from Krishna. She made the sacrifice. She went through the austerities. She was determined. She only focused on that one thing, Krishna. And her bhakti had awoken. So approaching her, Parashuram said, my daughter, you ran away from your wedding and therefore I was defamed in the town and the whole society. I was defamed. Please return with me to the city. It's so unsafe you're living here alone in a dense forest. What if a wild animal or tiger will eat you? So Karmati Bai had full faith in Krishna. She smiled and she said, Father, I will not return to the false relationships of this world. I will not return to the false relationships of this world. I want to stay in the beautiful forest of Vrindavan where the divine couple roams. I want to become their servant, part of their family, so to speak. So Father said, my dear daughter, don't worry. Just come. I promise that you won't have to get married to anyone. Just stay with us, your parents, and serve your Krishna at home. But she was undeterred. Karmati Bai replied, one who has nectar in his hand and runs towards the so-called pleasures of this world is most foolish. Father, you should also remain here and do bhajan in Braj. Leave everything behind and take shelter of Vrindavan. So then she did something really amazing. She made a beautiful deity of Krishna out of the mud of the Jamuna River and gave it to her father Parashuram. Now it's written that when Parashuram returned to the town of Shrikar, he basically just stayed home and served that deity every day with great love. So one day the king, he said to one of his ministers, actually it was his chief minister, he said, I haven't seen Parashuram for some time. Why is he not coming to the court? Go and find him and bring him here. So the messenger went to the home, the residence of Parashuram, and there's some discussion took place, and then he came back to the court. And he informed the king that the Rajguru, Parashuram, will not be attending court anymore because, like his daughter in Vrindavan, he has now become the servant of the King of Kings, Krishna. He's the servant of the King of Kings. Before he was the servant of the king, now he's saying, I'm servant of the King of Kings, Krishna. Now, of course, let us remember that Parashuram and the king, they were tight. They were very close. So the king just smiled. And he went to where Parashuram lived and he said, I think to resolve this issue, I will myself go to speak some sense into your daughter and bring her back here with me. So the king himself went to Vrindavan with many soldiers. And after some time, he found that Karmati Bai was living at Brahmakund, so he went there. And he tried in every way to convince her to come back to the kingdom. At one point he said, my dear girl, how can this dusty village of Vrindavan compare with the royal opulence of my palace? So she replied, my dear king, what to speak of your palace? The opulence of just 1 grain of Brajrenu, dust here in Vrindavan, is more precious than the entire opulence of the material creation. For it alone can bestow prema upon a pilgrim. So more conversation, went on, and finally the king, he understood her feelings, and he asked for forgiveness from her. It's described. And as he agreed to let her stay there. And before leaving, he asked Karmati Bai, is there anything I can do for you? Is there any service I can render you? So she replied, and this was very interesting. She said, you can make a temple for my Lord Krishna here on the banks of Brahmakund. Again, we see the royalty in an interesting way, being called to Vrindavan to make a beautiful temple for the Lord. Yes, you can make a temple for my Lord here on the banks of Brahmakund. So the king agreed. And some months later, I was reading, construction of that temple began in earnest. It took a number of years to complete. And when it was complete, Karmati Bai, she did her bhajan there for many years until her last breath. Now, in time, that beautiful, ornate temple was destroyed by foreign invaders. But remnants of it remain, because it was a huge, huge complex. So it was destroyed, but there's certain parts of that huge temple that remain even today. And one such remnant can be seen in the present day Ranganath temple complex, which is not far from Brahmakund. This Ranganath temple complex is also very large, and it was built afterwards, after this, her temple was built. So there are some remnants of her temple inside that complex. Out of respect, they kept those remnants there. So we can go and see. It's not far from Brahmakund, where she did her bhajan. And actually, Karmati Bai's samadhi is near to Brahmakund as well, where there's that diorama of her on the banks of Brahmakund that I mentioned previously. So once again, we've heard how a royal family contributed to the building of a temple in Vrindavan. Now, when I was researching that history, I was very pleased when it came to the part where Karmati Bai is, glorifying Braj Renu as being more important than the king's palace. The Braj Renu, the dust of Vrindavan. And then I kind of went into searching more about Braj Renu because it just played an important part in that pastime. And I came across several references how in the olden days, the Brajabasis would adore and worship that dust. And rightfully so, as they do today, but it was, as I'll be explaining, they really got into it. And rightfully so. Because I found in Srimad Bhagavatam a quote about the dust of Vrindavan. 10th canto, 30th chapter, 29th verse says, and I quote, "The dust of Govinda's lotus feet is so sacred that even Brahma, Shiva, and the goddess of fortune, Rama, take that dust on their heads to dispel sinful reactions." The dust of Govinda's lotus feet is so sacred that even Brahma, Shiva, and the goddess of fortune, Rama, take that dust on their heads to dispel sinful reactions. Bhagavatam. And Srila Prabhupada says in one lecture, he said in one lecture, quote, "If you want something from the dust of Hyderabad, you can't get it because that dust is material. But in Vrindavan, even from the dust, if you want anything, it will be delivered immediately." Srila Prabhupada. So I was reading that previously in Vrindavan, going 100, 200 years back, there was a annual festival called Dhulat Utsav, in which the Brajabasis would, come together with mridangas and kartals and trumpets, and they would do parikrama around Vrindavan while throwing the dust of Vrindavan at each other in a playful mood, rolling in the dust, taking big pots of dust and throwing it on each other, like people do with colors today. Well, then also, but, colors, but here they're doing it with the dust. They fill big pots with the dust and pour it on top of each other. So dhul means the dust, and lot means rolling or playing. So dhulot, this means the festival of rolling and playing in the dust of Braj. Just a festival, just for that. Just for the Braj Renu. You throw it and you pour it and you roll in it and you put them in your mouth, and a whole festival around the Braj Renu. And there's a nice verse in the Braj Bhasa language that glorifies this immortal dust. Mukti kahe Gopal so, Meri mukti bataiye, Braj Raj ud mastak lage, Mukti mukt haye jaye. Goddess Mukti asked Gopal Krishna, "Oh Gopal, I am liberating everyone, but who will liberate me?" So Gopal said, "If one particle of dust of Braj will touch your forehead, you, Mukti, will also get liberation." If one particle of dust of Braj will touch your forehead, you, mukti, you'll also get liberation. Hare Krishna. Now, it's also said that in olden times, Brajabasis, as I mentioned, they would eat a few particles of Vrindavan dust from time to time. It's not surprising. We know even Krishna, once as a small child, ate the dust of Braj, the dirt. It's the same. Last Kartik, I watched a theater about Krishna eating dirt, Braj Renu, performed by some Brajabasis on the Parikrama mark. This was during the Kartik month, outside on the path. I had someone there to translate for me, and I found the dialogue to be very interesting. When Mother Yasoda asked Krishna, Lala, your brother Balaram said that you have eaten some dirt, some dust. Why would you do that? I always arrange for you to eat butter and curd. Why would you eat the dust of Vrindavan? So cute. Krishna replied to Mother Yasoda as follows. Yoras naye mishre makan me, yoras naye chapan drakan me, voras braj raj ke chakan me. I'm getting better at Brajbasa. Krishna said, this sweet taste of the dust of Braj is not found even in sweet butter and milk, neither in the 56 tasty kinds of food items, Maya. Hare Krishna. Unfortunately, the Dulat Utsav, the festival we described, it's no longer practiced as far as I could see. Maybe because there's less and less dust in Vrindavan due to the modern construction going on in the apartment buildings and the roads and what's not. There's not much dust left. In previous years, the whole of the Parikrama marg that we walk around, that 11-kilometer walk around Vrindavan, the Vrindavan Parikrama, the whole Parikrama was just thick dust. I remember 73, 74, 75. In those early years, it was just dust. It was so nectarian. Now it's all gone. That's just a concrete, highway that literally goes around Vrindavan. It's all cars and trucks and motorbikes and scooters, and it's not the same. So maybe, just maybe someday, the city council in Vrindavan will make plans to revive the dust of Vrindavan. And in this mood, we'll finish today with a quote from the poet Harishwari. Same mood. He writes, Krishna, you blessed the residents of earth with the dust of Braj. We who are in the heavenly planets feel cheated because we never received it. We who are in the heavenly planets, the devatas, we feel cheated because we have never received it. Dear Lord, there are devotees in the lower planetary systems also, like Bali Maharaj, who also feel cheated that they have not received this dust of Vrindavan. Please be merciful upon us all. So let's hope that the city council revives the dust, brings just, let it manifest again so we can roll in it and throw it and play with it and put some particles in our mouths. Hare Krishna. I hope that you enjoyed this history lesson about Vrindavan as well as the glorification of Braj Renu. We're very busy here in America. This big festival's coming up and we have to travel. But I'll do my best to continue our series every Tuesday and Friday. Maybe, just maybe, when the summer comes, June, July, and August, when we're on the Polish tour. It's a big challenge this year, reviving the Polish festival tour. We're planning to do it. I may just lecture on Fridays. But let's see. I'll try to do 2 a week, but if not possible, at least 1 a week. And then, after the summer tour is over, I'll be back in Braj. And we can continue with it. Let's see how it goes. But I'll be back in a couple days here. So from America, thank you very much. Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Shama Sundar ki, Vrindavaneshwari Shrimati Radharani ki, Mayapur Dham ki, Gaur Nitai ki, Shri Krishna Sankirtan Yagya ki, Braj Renu ki, all the beautiful buildings in Braj ki, the 5,000 temples ki, back home, back to Godhead ki, Srila Prabhupada, the revealer of the Dham ki, Gaur Premanandi, Jai Jai Sisi Radhe Sham. Hare Krishna.